The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting soft rays of light across the room as I meticulously folded my clothes and packed them into my suitcase. Riley's absence was palpable, her usually bustling presence replaced by a haunting silence that echoed in the empty spaces of our home. With each item I placed into my suitcase, the weight of her absence bore down on me, leaving me feeling strangely hollow. As I zipped up my suitcase, I couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling that lingered in the air. Riley's departure from our usual routine was jarring, her usual warmth replaced by a hurried peck on the cheek before she darted out the door off to her own obligations. It wasn't like her, and the nagging worry gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. Downstairs, the faint aroma of coffee lingered in the kitchen, a stark reminder of our shared mornings and the rituals we once held dear. Riley's absence in the kitchen, her cheerful humming absent from the air, left a void that seemed to swallow everything in its wake. With a heavy sigh, I heaved my suitcase off the bed and made my way downstairs, the weight of uncertainty heavy on my shoulders. Riley's behavior, her departure from our usual routine, it all felt wrong, out of place. But as I headed out the door, the hustle and bustle of the world outside beckoning me forward, I pushed those thoughts aside, determined to focus on the conference ahead. At the airport, surrounded by the frenetic energy of travelers rushing to and fro, I found myself lost in a sea of faces, each one a stranger in the chaos of departure. The overhead announcements blared, the steady hum of conversation providing a backdrop to my swirling thoughts. "Excuse me, sir, would you mind watching my bag for a moment?" A voice broke through the noise, pulling me out of my reverie. I turned to see a fellow traveler, a weary expression etched on his face as he gestured towards his suitcase. Of course, I replied with a nod, offering him a reassuring smile as he hurried off to attend to his own errands. As I stood there, keeping a watchful eye on his belongings, I couldn't help but wonder about Riley and the departure that had felt so unusual. Was it just my imagination, or was there something more lurking beneath the surface? The airport lounge buzzed with activity as I settled into one of the plush armchairs, my eyes fixed on the flickering screen of the nearby television. Despite the chaos around me, a sense of unease lingered in the back of my mind, fueled by Riley's uncharacteristic behavior before my departure. I glanced around the lounge, observing the hurried travelers bustling about, lost in their own worlds of departure and arrival. But my thoughts kept returning to Riley, her abrupt farewell, and the unsettling feeling that something was amiss. The television droned on in the background, the sound of news anchors' voices mixing with the chatter of fellow passengers. But it was the sight of the screen left on at home that sparked a flicker of suspicion within me. Riley's supposed late-night television habits clashed with the reality of her absence from home during those hours. "Excuse me, sir, do you mind if I sit here?" A woman's voice interrupted my thoughts, pulling me out of my reverie. I looked up to see a fellow traveler, a small smile playing on her lips as she gestured to the empty seat beside me. "Not at all, please have a seat," I replied, offering her a polite smile as she settled into the chair beside me. "Traveling for business or pleasure?" she asked, striking up a conversation as she glanced at the screen of her phone. "Business," I replied, my mind still preoccupied with thoughts of Riley and the unsettling revelations unfolding before me. As the minutes ticked by, I found myself lost in a whirlwind of uncertainty, my thoughts consumed by the discrepancies in Riley's behavior. Was it merely a coincidence, or was there more to her sudden departure from our usual routines? The nagging doubt gnawed at the edges of my consciousness, refusing to be ignored. With a heavy sigh, I tore my gaze away from the television screen, determined to push aside my suspicions and focus on the conference ahead. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, and that Riley's departure held more secrets than I dared to imagine. The flight to Minneapolis was uneventful, the drone of the plane's engines blending with the murmur of conversation around me. Despite my attempts to focus on the upcoming conference, my mind kept drifting back to Riley and the unsettling suspicions that had taken root in my thoughts. Somewhere over the vast expanse of clouds, a sudden realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. Riley's supposed late-night work shifts, her evasive responses, it all seemed to fit together in a puzzle of deception. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I reached for the in-flight entertainment system, flipping through the channels until I found the news. As I watched the screen, a knot formed in the pit of my stomach. The news anchor's voice faded into the background as my mind raced, connecting the dots with chilling clarity. Riley's lies, her clandestine behavior, it all pointed to one undeniable truth. She was having an affair. "Excuse me, sir, would you like something to drink?" A flight attendant's voice interrupted my thoughts, pulling me back to the present moment. I blinked, momentarily disoriented, before nodding in response. "Water, please," I replied, my voice sounding distant and hollow in my own ears. As the flight attendant bustled off to fulfill my request, I sank back into my seat, grappling with the enormity of the revelation before me. Riley's infidelity shook me to the core, shattering the illusion of trust and stability that had defined our marriage for so many years. The minutes stretched into eternity as I wrestled with my thoughts, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding around me. Riley's betrayal cut deep, leaving me feeling adrift in a sea of uncertainty and despair. "Sir, here's your water." The flight attendant's voice broke through my reverie, jolting me back to reality. I accepted the drink with a murmured thanks, my mind still reeling from the shock of discovery. As I stared out the window at the endless expanse of sky, I couldn't help but wonder how I had missed the signs of Riley's betrayal for so long. The truth hung heavy in the air, casting a shadow over everything I thought I knew about our marriage. And as the plane continued its journey towards Minneapolis, I knew that my life would never be the same again. The weight of revelation hung heavy on my shoulders as I stepped off the plane in Minneapolis, the bustling airport terminal a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within me. Riley's betrayal echoed in my mind like a relentless drumbeat, drowning out the noise of the crowd around me. With a determined stride, I made my way to the hotel where the conference was being held, my thoughts consumed by the confrontation that awaited me. I needed answers, closure, and above all, the truth. As I entered the hotel lobby, the familiar sights and sounds of a bustling conference greeted me, but my mind remained fixed on the task at hand. I navigated the maze of hallways, my heart pounding in anticipation of what was to come. Finally, I reached Riley's room, steeling myself for the confrontation that lay ahead. With a deep breath, I knocked on the door, my knuckles rapping against the wood with a resounding echo. The door swung open, revealing Riley standing on the other side, a look of surprise flickering across her features before being replaced by a forced smile. "Alan, what a surprise," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Cut the act, Riley," I replied, my tone cold and clipped. "We need to talk." Riley's smile faltered, her eyes widening in alarm as she took in the steely resolve in my gaze. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "No, Riley, everything is not okay," I said, my voice rising with barely contained anger. "I know about the affair, about Jerry, and about Amelia." Riley's face drained of color, her eyes widening in shock as the truth of my words sank in. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't lie to me, Riley," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I have proof, evidence of your betrayal." Tears welled up in Riley's eyes, her mask of composure crumbling in the face of my accusations. "I'm sorry, Alan," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I never meant to hurt you." But her words fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the overwhelming sense of betrayal that consumed me. With a heavy heart, I turned and walked away, leaving Riley standing alone in the doorway, her tears a silent testament to the shattered remains of our marriage. The confrontation with Riley left me reeling, my emotions raw and jagged like shattered glass. As I retreated to the solitude of my hotel room, the weight of betrayal pressed down on me, suffocating me with its oppressive presence. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone, dialing the number of our family lawyer. The decision to end our marriage was a painful one, but it was a necessary step towards reclaiming my shattered sense of self. "Hello, this is Steve speaking," came the lawyer's crisp voice on the other end of the line. "Steve, it's Alan," I replied, my voice hollow with grief. "We need to talk about initiating divorce proceedings." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line before Steve spoke again, his voice tinged with concern. "Are you sure about this, Alan? Divorce is a serious decision." "I'm sure," I replied, my voice firm despite the tremors of doubt that lingered within me. "I can't stay married to someone who betrayed my trust so completely." Steve sighed, his voice tinged with sympathy. "Very well, Alan, I'll start the paperwork right away. But please take some time to think this through. Divorce is a final step, and there's no going back once the papers are signed." I thanked Steve before ending the call, the weight of his words settling over me like a suffocating blanket. But despite the uncertainty that loomed before me, I knew that there was no turning back. Riley's betrayal had shattered the foundation of our marriage, leaving nothing but rubble in its wake. With a heavy heart, I began the painful process of untangling our lives, closing joint accounts and dividing assets with a sense of detachment that bordered on numbness. The love and connection that had once bound us together were nothing but distant memories now, lost to the winds of betrayal. As I signed the final papers, sealing the fate of our marriage with a stroke of the pen, I felt a profound sense of emptiness wash over me. But amidst the wreckage of our shattered relationship, a glimmer of hope flickered in the darkness. A chance for a new beginning, free from the shadows of deceit and betrayal. And with that thought, I took my first tentative steps towards a future untainted by the ghosts of the past. With the divorce proceedings finalized and the remnants of our shattered marriage laid to rest, I found myself adrift in a sea of introspection. Alone in the silence of my now empty home, I grappled with the profound sense of loss that weighed heavily on my heart. As I sifted through the debris of our broken relationship, memories both bitter and sweet flooded my mind, each one a poignant reminder of what we had once shared. The laughter, the tears, the whispered promises, all of it now reduced to mere echoes of a love that had withered and died. In the solitude of my grief, I found myself reflecting on the choices that had led us to this point, each one a fork in the road that had ultimately led to our downfall. Was there something I could have done differently? Some way to save us from the inevitable path we had chosen? Lost in my thoughts, I reached for my phone, the familiar weight of it in my hand tethered to the outside world. With a hesitant touch, I scrolled through the contacts list, my thumb hovering over Riley's name before moving on to the next. "Hey, Dad, how are you holding up?" came a voice on the other end of the line, pulling me out of my reverie. It was Ethan, my eldest son, his concern palpable even through the crackling of the phone line. I'm okay, Ethan," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "Just taking it one day at a time." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line before Ethan spoke again, his voice filled with empathy. "We're here for you, Dad," he said softly. "Whatever you need, we'll be there." I thanked him before ending the call, the warmth of his words a balm to my wounded soul. But even as I clung to the support of my family, I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with obstacles I could scarcely imagine. As I sat alone in the darkness, surrounded by the remnants of a life that was no more, I made a silent vow to myself to find the strength to move forward, to heal the wounds of the past, and to forge a new path untainted by the shadows of betrayal. And with that newfound resolve burning bright within me, I faced the uncertain future with a sense of determination and hope, knowing that no matter what lay ahead, I would emerge from the darkness stronger and more resilient than ever before. Thank you for listening to the story to the end, and if you like it, please support us with a like as well as subscribe to our channel. Write in the comments what